All right, good morning, everyone. Happy Saturday. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Miva campus in Abuja. Thank you to everyone who's joining us online, on Google Meet, on YouTube. We're so excited to have you here for our very first masterclass of 2024. My name is Anyekeme Umo. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Miva Open University. And with me, I have a man who really needs no introduction, but for the sake of the formality, I will introduce him, okay? Sim Shagaya. Sim is the Chancellor of Miva Open University and the founder and group CEO of the uLesson group, which comprises Miva and uLesson Education. In 2023, the uLesson group was ranked number 1 on Fast Company's most innovative companies in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. Sim is the founder and former CEO of Konga, one of West Africa's largest e-commerce platforms. You guys will keep clapping though. And the founder of eMotion Advertising, a leading out-of-home media company. A serial entrepreneur with an illustrious career that includes working as a banker at Rand Merchant Bank in South Africa and becoming Google's head for Africa. Sim was named in Forbes' list of 10 most powerful men in Africa. This resume is powerful, but I'm not even finished. Sim trained as an electrical engineer at the George Washington University and Dartmouth College, where he received bachelor's and master's, respectively. He also earned an MBA from the Harvard Business School. Sim Shagaya.
You should hear her resume.
Well, we're going to keep the focus on you, Sim.
Okay.
But before we go full into today's topic, as a serial entrepreneur, right? If your business had a theme song, what would it be?
That would be Stronger by Kanye West.
Ooh, that's a good
You know
one.
that one? That's the one.
That's a good one.
You guys know that one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Don't make me rap it.
All right, so the theme for today's masterclass is I have an idea, what next? The art of execution. So I'd love for you to really talk us through that what next part. So I have a couple questions. We'll go through them. The audience here in Abuja will definitely have questions, our students who are present, and then we'll have questions from the folks online, which we'll also try to get to as well. All right. So, we say that everyone has an idea, but that might not be the case for some people. So some people struggle with actually coming up with ideas. As someone who hasn't struggled with that, given that you've created several companies and then several products within those companies, how do you generate your business ideas?
Okay, so you wouldn't think ideas are something that come through a process. I mean, certainly earlier on, I think in my entrepreneurial life, I wasn't as deliberate in coming up with ideas, which also meant a lot of the things that I tried just didn't work. I feel like from the age of about maybe 25 to 30, I tried, maybe 10, 12 different things. Oh, wow. And it was very, very random and it wasn't very purposeful. But it turns out that there actually is kind of like a deliberate framework you can use to come up with ideas. And I've kind of refined it over the course of my journey. So, an idea is basically a vision of the future, right? You're seeing a world that other people see also, but you are seeing a world that is different. And it could be something that's really big with big regional or even global implications, or it could be something at the corner of your street. You see a pharmacy there where there's no pharmacy right now. But the selection of that idea, if you want to maximize the chance of success, has to go through in my mind, several filters. So, think of it as a spectrum. On the one hand, you have people that are kind of frozen out of fear and wait for that perfect idea, and so never jump into anything, never do anything. And then on the other end of that spectrum is me when I was young, where anything that comes to mind, you wake up and you just run and go and do it. And then it doesn't work, and then you turn around. But I think the right answer is somewhere in between. And how you find that in between, generally what I do. So before uLesson, for example, I had a portfolio of ideas.
Okay.
So, you can think of it as like venture capitalists. Venture capitalists are these investors that invest in businesses. And they will often have a portfolio of companies that they're investing in. And some of those companies will do well and some will fail, etc. The entrepreneur has to think about ideas the same way. I think you have to have a portfolio of these ideas in your mind, 3, 4, 5, 6, even 10. And then you kind of test them out over a range of criteria to find the right one. And generally, it's not a good idea. So before uLesson, I was looking into agriculture. I was looking into building solar power plants. There were a range of things I was looking at. uLesson was just one of those things. And then, you spend a bunch of time kind of testing each one of those ideas. And you test them against many criteria. So I think the most important one, and we don't give this enough credit, is that the most successful ideas generally will lie in the field or the realm of the entrepreneur's specialization. So what do I mean by that? So if you're that pharmacy idea I had before, generally speaking, if you're going to start a pharmacy, your chances of being successful, or the team's chances of being successful, would be improved if there was a pharmacist on the team. If you're going to start Google, it would help that you are studying computer science, as Larry Page and Sergey Brin did at Stanford. And so, when I really went into it, for example, and I was looking at agriculture, and I was excited about the prospects of it. It wasn't that the passion for it wasn't there, and the things I thought I could do weren't there, but I realized that I just didn't have the domain expertise.
I see.
And time is limited, right? I mean, we've been doing uLesson for 5 years now. If you're, so 5 years is a chunky amount of time. If you're going to spend your life on something, you want to maximize success. So that's one thing. You want to kind of figure out what is in your domain of expertise, and not just you individually, but like your team. Yeah. So if you're going to do something, again, to stretch this pharmacy idea, that is at an intersect of technology, information technology, and pharmacies, then one member of the team ideally should be a pharmacist or a doctor or something like that. And the other member of the team should know something about tech. Then your chances of success are maximized. So that's one whole universe of things. Then, there are a couple of other things also. I mean, I think a bunch of research has been done about this. But in my mind, I found this to be really true. This is not really original to me. More than the team, which is an incredibly important factor in Ekime, we'll talk about that hopefully over and over today, is the timing. You can have a great team, you can have all the drive, you can have all the passion for what you're trying to do, but your timing can be completely wrong. And so, in thinking about timing, you have to ask, has something changed in the world that is enabling this right now? There are many ideas. I mean, you'd be amazed. Many of the things we're doing now are ideas that entrepreneurs had in Nigeria, around the world, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago. There are examples of that.
But the timing wasn't right.
The timing was just completely off. There's nothing really new about human vision. There are people that sat here 100 years ago, and I can imagine, thought a day will come when education would change and people would not need to go to a physical space to learn.
Right.
I can imagine somebody was thinking that in my mind's eye 50, 60 years ago. But then the tools and the context weren't there. But for us, when, I got into this, AY got into this, a couple of people in this room were here with us at the very beginning, the timing was right at that point. So, 4G, fourth generation wireless networks have started making their way around the country. So that was in place. Forget about temporary things like COVID. That was like a temporary propellant. But there are a lot of contextual things in place. So timing is very important. I feel like there are some things that I've done even that the timing just wasn't right.
Right.
And then there's, I don't know if passion is the right word. Do you have an emotional attachment to, are you emotional about this thing you're pursuing? I think that's important. Because doing this work of building a business, first of all, I have to say it's not for everybody. I think we've kind of started to romanticize this whole work.
Entrepreneurship.
Yeah, exactly, and start to believe it's for everybody, and it really isn't. It's a select few group of very bold, daring people, slightly foolish, that feel like they can change the world. And you have to have an emotional attachment to it because it's hard. It's really, really hard for many reasons. Any entrepreneur who's been successful or has even failed will tell you that it's hard. And so you have to have something driving you beyond money.
Right.
You have to really ask yourself because if it's money you're optimizing for, entrepreneurship is not necessarily the way you can, there are a range of other ways you can make money. So, all of these things, I think, feed into sort of your chances of an idea. You have to be very tactical, have a portfolio of them, test them. If you want to do agriculture, for example, you can't sit in a city. You have to go into the farm, spend 2 weeks there, and actually, can I do this? And test all of these ideas in a portfolio, filter it for that. Has something changed in the world that's enabling this right now that wasn't there before?
Timing.
The timing of it, that's very important. Am I sufficiently passionate about solving this problem? And then you can pick the right thing. And do I have the domain expertise to make this happen?
Okay.
Yeah.
And you answered even some of the further questions that we had about validating the feasibility of the idea. So thank you for that. Yeah. When you're testing the idea, you mentioned the example of agriculture actually going into the farm.
Yes.
But on paper, or if you're taking like a business or entrepreneurship course, you might be told about a business plan, creating a business plan, right?
Yeah.
How important should that be to the what next, to the execution?
So the whole notion of a business plan has changed a lot. I feel like since I was in undergrad. So when I was an undergraduate, there was actually a class where they made us write business plans, and I was in engineering school, and we didn't like it very much. But nowadays that's changed completely. I think there's a realization that has come to the mind of investors. So these are very savvy, very, very, very knowledgeable, experienced investors that don't expect business plans often. And I think that that's built on the fact that things change so much.
Yeah.
And what you start with, your first, so what is a business plan, right? It is, here's the opportunity I'm pursuing. Here is, my differentiation. Here's how I'm going to go about it. Here's what the team is going to look like. Here's what my first income statement looks like. And even to the degree you know how to do all of those things, the truth is that all of those things will change radically over the course of the business. I can't think of one facet of uLesson that, myself, Ayolua, Magdalene, some of the people in this room that were there at the beginning that we were operating on that has remained the same. The only things that have essentially remained the same is our values. The values have remained the same. And maybe we've crystallized them and articulated them, but the operating structure of the business, the financial model, the products we built, it's all changed. So for me, at least, if I were an investor, I don't think a business plan is important per se. Business plans have given way to the deck.
Yes, pitch decks.
The pitch deck, So the 15, 20 slide pitch deck that kind of outlines your idea and outlines what you're trying to do. And it's definitely much less intensive, but I think has as much utility as a 30-page Word document. I don't think that is as important as say a pitch deck. Okay. Yeah.
All right. So if we're moving away from that, then to the actual testing and validation. Sometimes you would build a minimum viable product, an MVP, or a prototype, right? I'd like to use a specific real-time example here. So uLesson, you've talked about, and I mentioned earlier, uLesson is launching a new product this quarter. I know that it's one you're really excited about. Can you share a bit about that product, Classboard, and how important it is to create an MVP or a prototype when you're moving from idea to, in this case, product?
Yes. Okay, so Classboard is something I'm really excited about.
I know.
it was actually the initial vision for uLesson. So far, uLesson has sold products to homes in a supplementary context. So we supplement the core education that a primary or secondary school student is experiencing. But Classboard represents our first push into the classroom. And it's going to cause us to rethink many things. The product itself is physically different. uLesson is kind of, to the degree you buy it with hardware, it's captured in a tablet and the kid uses the tablet and it's great and it works. But Classboard is, a big 65-inch class,
Smartboard.
Yeah, smartboard, a multi-touch screen. But it carries all of the curriculum and academic power of uLesson. But that causes you to change, everything now comes under question. The way we sold the classic uLesson product is very different from the way we're going to sell Classboard. The way our supply chain looks is going to change. Everything, the entire DNA of the product, well, not entire, but I would say sort of maybe 50% of the DNA changes. So this is important, Anyekeme, because, and this is important for why an MVP, why you just have to get a minimum viable product out there. So a minimum viable product is what is that minimum product you can use to get to market? Not because you are lazy, not because you don't want to do the work.
But to validate.
But to validate it. Paradoxically, if you try and perfect it, many times that doesn't work. So why is it important to do that? Is because even in the process of creating Classboard and getting it to market, what are we doing now? Our colleagues are now doing focus groups with teachers, right? Eloho is doing focus groups with teachers. We're talking to teachers, trying to find out whether we're doing things right. We're talking to customers, trying to find out is our pricing right. And so in that sense, the creation of a new product, it's a beautiful thing because it's not unilateral. It's not the entrepreneur and his or her team standing there and saying, I'm bringing something to the market. It's an iterative, collaborative process between you and the market. You have to listen to the market. And the market will talk to you. It's amazing how the market talks to you. So I'm just going to digress for a second. I mean, the challenge we have, I certainly had when I was much less experienced, is that first of all, I didn't realize the market could speak to me. And so I didn't even create the channels for the market to speak to me. And so, coming back to classic uLesson, for example, when we first went to market, one of the things we did is we said everybody had to get on the phone and do customer service and do sales. Because in the process of selling, the customer will say, well, do you have this? Do you have that? And those are not comments that you should just brush off. Those are comments you should bring back to the team and say, here's what the market is saying. So we need to adjust and adapt and amend and mold it this way and shape it that way. And that, it improves your chances of success so greatly. That process of collaborating with the market. The market doesn't know it's doing it, but it's telling you what it wants. Take Classboard, for example. It's a minor thing. So it's this great product. I wish we had slides here and I'll show it to you. And it's, so far the market's been really excited about it. Schools are excited about it. And, we're getting all kinds of pre-orders. But some of the comments coming back is, okay, now I have this thing in class and I'm worried about harmattan and dust and, elements. I need to cover it somehow. And so that came back to management meeting and we're like, no, so we need to design something that looks like a suit jacket. And let's cost this out and see if it changes the margins and the profit. And we need to go make a jacket to cover this thing. And we need to think about the customer. It needs to be zipped in this particular way and put the logo on it. That is listening to the market. Right. If you just dismiss it and you say, look, here's what I have, buy it, take it or leave it, then you come up with suboptimal solutions. So,
So it sounds like when a prospective entrepreneur is thinking about this prototype MVP process, they should be thinking about it from like the why of why they're doing it, which is this opportunity for them to not only validate but listen to the market.
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful. Okay. This is actually a good segue because now you're interacting with the market, right? You open yourself up to liability potentially. So let's talk about some legal considerations.
Right.
When you're starting a business, of course, things should be like everything is important and should be taken seriously. But for you, two facets to this question. One, is there one legal consideration that you would never overlook as a business owner? And then two, is there any experience that you've had in the legal aspect of business building that has kind of embedded a certain type of vigilance where legal is concerned for you?
So, if you look at the university we're building together, Anya, come here. It has regulatory oversight. There's deep regulatory.
Yes.
We have a regulator, the National Universities Commission,
Yes.
that has given us license to do this. In the sphere of businesses that are regulated, whether that's hospitals or universities or telecom companies or oil companies, things like this.
Financial institutions.
I would not overlook regulation at all. I think it's incredibly important that you consider regulation and you build that into sort of your financial model in your mind. That's very, very important. In the case of businesses generally, I haven't really experienced any sort of litigation or anything like that per se. You want to fulfill righteousness, you want to register your company, you want to make sure you're paying your taxes. Yes. You want to, make provisions for all of those things. But I think you want to ask yourself first and foremost, without sort of beating it too much, is that, am I subject to regulation? And hope in the context of trying to avoid regulation, the regulator won't find me, or no, you're just doing something illegal. Hope is not a strategy in the context of regulation.
Great.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
All right, cool. You mentioned something here about baking in regulation into your financial model when you're even thinking about that.
Yes.
So, money is a big aspect to starting and running a business. Can you give just like an overview about this, like funding and financing, maybe with the lens of some of the companies that you've built in the past?
Yes. Maybe let's start here. So you have to think of, you need to kind of remove from your mind that funding is tied strictly to an investor. I think that's also something that we're seeing these days that I don't think is healthy. Money can come from several different ways. The best way is from customers. That's always the best way. The second is from investors, which I just mentioned, and that can be investors that are not yourself. So venture capitalists, private equity, or it can be your own money, which is termed bootstrapping generally. So my money in my account, I'm going to withdraw my money and I'm going to use my own money to do this. That is always a very powerful thing. And it actually is a really strong signal to investors. Not so much to customers, but to investors that, she has put her own skin in the game.
Right.
That's a really important one. So I think back to my first business, which actually met some successes, this outdoor billboard business that I've long sold. And the entire investment for the first year or two was by myself and a friend of mine. Yeah, so this was our money. We didn't go out there to raise any money. And it motivates you and it focuses your mind, I think, in a way that none of the other categories of money can focus your mind. And then the fourth way, which is more important in Nigeria, not so much in other markets, is grants.
Okay.
Yeah, some people will use grants, which is valid. Anywhere you get money, you take it. But I find that the healthiest or the most desirable category is the customer.
Yeah.
So, the best business in the world is the business in which the customer has given you money before you've produced the product to say, go and produce the product. That's gold, right?
Yeah.
And that actually happens. So there are these platforms these days. We haven't really found one in Nigeria, like GoFundMe.
Like
Kickstarter, GoFundMe. We've tried to do it in Nigeria in the context of agriculture. I think Thrive or something like that, a company like that. But these are very powerful platforms because you advertise, you put your product on there, you do a video, you do a little product demo, and then a bunch of people who want to buy the product will give you money and say, go and make it. When you're done making it, I want one.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So that's a powerful thing. But I think, generally speaking, you want to put some skin in the game. And that can be money, and if you don't have money, that can be time. And I should also mention, it also means that your first business, or at least even if it's only one business you drew through this, precious life you have, will start small. It always starts small. And then you roll that. So I've had this history of taking my winnings from a business and doubling down into the next one. So some of the funding that went into Conga was my winnings from the billboard business. And then some of the startup capital for uLesson was some of the winnings from Conga. I always kind of double down, which maybe some people will tell me that's not so great. You got to stop doubling down at some point. But yeah.
You win big at the end of it. So
Yeah, no, sure. Yeah, sure. Hopefully.
You're banking on hope? No, banking on execution.
Execution. No. Yeah.
All right. So part of executing, you have a product, maybe you have a team, the customers have given you some money, you put some of your money into it. How do you now execute a marketing? First of all, how do you develop a successful marketing strategy for a new venture or a new product?
So marketing is incredibly important. There are different people that have different kinds of philosophies around this, but I think the differences are just on the superficial level. So if you look at a powerful brand, an automotive, electric vehicle brand that has taken off, that has captured the world's imagination is Tesla.
Yes.
And they are notorious for not doing any advertising. But I think, with all due respect to the founder, Elon Musk, who's somebody that I just am in awe of, I think the truth is that because of his personal brand and his reach, they actually do advertising.
Yeah.
It's just that it's free. But that said, so marketing is important. But that said, I believe very strongly that the product should lead. You can't lead with marketing. Every time that, in my experience, I've tried to do that, or in the case studies that I've observed, what I've experienced from friends, you lead with a bunch of advertising. What ends up happening is you mess up the economics of your business.
How so?
So you can basically, let me put it in this most simplistic form. If I had 1,000 naira today, and I gave you that 1,000 naira to buy a 500 naira note from you, would you sell it to me?
Yeah.
You would sell me 500 for 1,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that's the most simplistic. You could basically be buying revenue while the underlying economics of the business don't work. You're spending a lot of advertising money to buy customers when really those customers are not profitable customers. I think what you want to do first is lead with the product. And that could mean many different things on a micro level. It could be supported by advertising, but it could also mean just that first entrepreneur and his colleague or her colleague knocking on that first door and selling and getting that cash in, and then seeing that. And then basically in the chemical equation that is commerce, advertising becomes a catalyst. It's not a core reactant in the equation. It's something that accelerates the selling of the product versus being like a core reactant.
You're showing your engineering roots right now.
I'm geeking out too much. So that's kind of how I think about it. But you do need to do it. And there are different techniques to it. Are you selling to businesses? Are you selling to individuals? There are some products that sell to both. There are some products that are completely immune to advertising. It's instead about reaching communities like in our case, we're selling Classboard. You do a bunch of billboards and things like that. It's great for brand building. But what we really need to do is get to communities of teachers and schools. It's a high touch, high involvement product. So what you want to do is to demonstrate it. So the challenge that my colleagues and myself have in uLesson is, how do we get this product either in front of the decision maker that's buying this Classboard, or getting that decision maker to our office somehow to experience it. And So that's the primary challenge versus, say, you're selling a consumer brand like toothpaste that requires advertising. And being simplistic, we could talk about marketing the whole day, but one big bifurcation, one big separation is: are you selling to businesses or are you selling to individuals? Is this high touch? Is this high experiential? If I want to buy that Tesla I talked about before, I want to get in the cockpit. I want to feel it. I want to smell it. I want to maybe test drive it. So a lot of these things will drive your marketing strategy. Is this something that I can sell door to door? Is this something I can sell over the phone? How is it fulfilled? And again, some of these components you will iterate as you go to market. So that's why often savvy investors and entrepreneurs will talk about go-to-market.
Yeah.
Your go-to-market strategy.
Right.
Now you've built your product, you've got to go to market. And I love that term. It literally, like in my mind, harkens back to like market day in like an Achebe book or something, and you have to take your wares to the market and go and sell it and do whatever you have to do to sell it and shout loudly and get your product. And going to market will basically be a means of deciding what's the best way to sell it, what's working, what's not working, double down on, what's not working, kill it quickly. The other thing I'll mention is as the business scales, as your numbers increase, you will find that your go-to-market will change.
Right. This is good.
Yeah.
Okay. Trying to decide which direction to take this. I want to stay in marketing a little bit for one more question around branding. We know the effectiveness. You talked about Tesla. Like that is a well-branded really good product. I'm curious if you have an unpopular opinion about branding that you could share.
Ooh.
Any hot take?
An unpopular opinion about branding. Not really. I mean, I'm cynical about when the value of the brand, and I probably have friends that work in this sector, so I don't know how this is going to go. But I'm cynical about when the value of a brand vastly exceeds the intrinsic value of the product. So you will see, so if you want to go buy a luxury brand today, like you're a big investor, you want to go buy, Gucci, you will find that a lot of the value of the business is the brand value, which, I'm not, I don't ascribe a lot of value to things like that from the point of view of goodwill. I'm a very product person. Yeah, and I don't think that is mutually exclusive from having a really good brand. You can create products that are incredibly just appealing and easy to use and make your life better and still have incredible brand value. A great example is Apple. Right. Those are just amazing products. And yet there's brand value there, but I don't feel like the brand value exceeds
the actual value of the product.
I feel like if somebody came up with a phone today that was more usable and could compose emails for me and I didn't have to do anything, I could just, I would move from Apple. But the functionality itself is so strong. So like, I don't know if my friends in luxury goods would agree with what I'm saying right now.
Okay, that's why it's an unpopular opinion. All right, so you've executed and now you're scaling and growing, right? Do you think that businesses have expiration dates? And if so, does that mean something about the business? Or can a business continue to scale and grow to like infinity, quote unquote?
Oh no, I don't think so. I think businesses are subjected to the same physical laws that we all are. Like as human beings, as animals, stars in the sky. Everything has its time and then fades away. It seems like that time horizon is even shortening When I was young, I experienced brands that were 100 years old, you know. But it feels like the lifespan of businesses now is even getting shorter. So much so that I think if you have a brand, or if you have a business rather, that survives 30 years, I think you've had a good run these days. For me personally, that doesn't take away from my aspiration that I would love for this particular business we're working on, this uLesson group, and its two divisions, uLesson and Miva, to be around for, I mean, I think the scope of what the work we have to do, and it's huge, and it's going to take so much time. And I hope I'm like a really old man. And
You're walking stick.
yes, walking stick, and like, you know, just barely cognitively there, and still like, seeing the brand on TV, whatever it is we're watching at that point. So I think, and that's one of the things that drew me to this, is I think that there's, so that 30 years I gave, of course, is an average. Yeah, I think there are business models that last a long time. I mean, Shell has been around a long time.
Right.
Ford, so I hope it's one of those brands. But naturally, yes, businesses have a lifespan.
Okay.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to entrepreneurs who are like looking to scale their operations after establishing just like a solid foundation for the business?
Yeah, I think this is where you get into the realm of team.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is where it becomes all about your team. Your limit is hard. It's hard set by the people that are around you. And it takes, and this is where also just personally, individually, it calls for a level of growth that you will surprise the entrepreneur and never stops. I feel like even now I'm still learning things. Like even in the past, I've learned some profound things about being an entrepreneur over the past even 3 months. And I hope we'll get the opportunity to talk about them, but really deep things. And so you have to build teams, and it's kind of like, so as the business starts to scale, then functions start to crystallize.
Right.
In the beginning, the functions are this like, the same 3, 4, 5 people are doing everything. And then specializations. Okay, it's like an embryo in the womb of a woman. As the embryo develops, then, it's all sort of all the cells look the same in the first few weeks, I guess. And then as you go on, then, a heart forms, and then nervous system forms, and all of these things form, and specialization. So the same thing in the business. After a while, marketing forms, and then you need finance. You need finance. And then you need sales, and you need a salesperson, and you need customer service. You got to take care of your customers. And so, and then you have to figure out how to allocate. That's the other thing as you scale. So you're getting resources coming in, whether from investors or customers. Resources are coming in the form of cash inflow.
Right.
And you got to take that cash and then start allocating to all these specializations.
Right.
And finding people that are better than you in all of these things.
In those specialized areas.
They have to be. They have to. I mean, there may be a specialization area that you continue to remain kind of the domain expert on. That happens often. But generally speaking, you will find you try and find the best marketer you can afford, and many times it's not money that convinces these people to join you. It's the dream you're selling. You try and find the best this and best that, and you put them together and you build this team. So team, and I think resource allocation starts becoming more important, because it's that team that will then tell you which direction you should go. You also generally want to find people. The ideal leader of a functional area should be somebody who has experienced the scaling of a business in that functional area previously. So maybe they're coming in now to be a manager or a VP or whatever title, but maybe in a previous business they were a junior person, but they experienced what it meant to go from 5 customers to 1,000. Right. And so you want that knowledge. And so you try and go out there and try and find these people and convince them and systematically try and bring them on board. I have one pharmacy in Karu, in the FCT, and now I'm trying to go from one pharmacy. I want to build a chain of pharmacies, which is an incredibly difficult thing to do. To go from 1 to 5, the complexity. Now you need to start looking for somebody that does supply chain. Now you're looking for a warehouse expert. And that person will tell you, okay, if one location is in Asokoro and one is in Karu and here's the ideal place and rents are cheaper here.
Yeah.
And they will have a knowledge that you just don't have. You don't have. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Talking about teams, when you're expanding, people in general, people are wild cards, right?
Yes.
How do you foster a team culture that aligns with the vision and, for the most part, kind of ensures the continued success of the venture? What are some key things that an entrepreneur should be looking at when they're thinking about that?
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of, when I was straying into kind of the realm of the things I've learned over the past 3 months.
Okay, great.
So, I mean, there's some of the things you can do, like we're doing now at uLesson. So I think like two years ago, we started taking culture seriously. I read a bunch of books that kind of really convinced me of, like, some of the great companies, those companies that have that longevity beyond the 30-year average we talked about before.
Right.
What you find is that underpinning those companies is not their factories or their processes or any of those things. It's their culture. It's culture that will allow you to leap from one opportunity to another opportunity. It's trite. Like, one example that people often talk about is Nokia. Nokia, I believe, started out making rubber boots.
Really?
Yeah. And then they jumped from that to something else. Next thing you know, they're making phones. And the thing that underpinned the innovation, and that's what the team was the culture that was what underpinned the ability to jump from thing to thing. When I look at uLesson, all kinds of technologies are going to come over the next 20 years, 10 years even. We are now in an age where creating media has gotten, relatively cheaper, and then generative AI is coming, and virtual reality and immersive technologies are coming. And if you don't have the culture to kind of to drive the shift, this is a big topic, to drive the shift from one thing to the other, then you find that it's possible that you dominate one chapter,
right?
But then in the next, you can't make the leap. And so some of the features that you need, that I found, that allow you to jump from one thing to the other, it's not so much our values. Our values at uLesson is we strive to be really honest. We are empathetic, meaning we try and feel for each other as colleagues, but also the customer. And we are innovative. But it's not that. Those are the values. I think the important thing there is a culture of honesty, so openness, a willingness to challenge each other, to have debates, and to not be dictatorial at all,
right?
But instead be open to keep, like, one of the biggest things that will pollute and poison culture is politics. So we try very hard to keep that out of the system. But all of these things together. So I mean, it manifests in plaques. If you are, those of you that are in this room physically, you would have seen walking in here. You'd see our values on the walls. Yeah. And this is who we are. And there's this thing we started doing recently where before meetings we actually recite our purpose and our values. Which is still awkward, but I'm getting used to it, and I think it's a good thing. But it has to go deeper than that. I think the leadership, the team, these values have to be sacrosanct. They are like, your, I don't want to make the comparison, they're almost like a holy book. These are the things that don't change, no matter what the technology is, no matter what happens. These are the things that don't change. And that guide all of your decision making. It's really, really important.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We're almost wrapped up on the questions that I have for you, and we'll go to the questions for the audience. But you tweeted something recently, and I would love to see if you could give us the exclusive of it on it.
Okay.
You had written that the hardest part of building in your part of the world is not the absence of infrastructure or the size of the market, But then you didn't give an answer, so maybe you can give it to us here.
Thanks, Anya. So, yeah, I mean, I feel like we talk often about how people who build businesses in our part of the world are subject to like infrastructural deficits. Right now, you can hear in the background the hum of a generator. And I feel like, I can generally deal with that. And then there's the addressable market, which largely is driven by the fact that our people have very low per capita income.
Yeah.
So even though, 200 million people on paper looks fantastic, but you find that, very few of us have, more than the equivalent of $1,000 in the bank account. So, and those are, and those create their own challenges. And I feel like I'm built like a tank, generally speaking.
What does that even mean?
I'm pretty resilient in the face of things like that, of infrastructural challenges. I can power through them. But I think the one we don't talk about often is, how can I put this? So, is the challenge of people. And I'm not saying that in any kind of judgmental way. So let me expand on that. Because our economy is not just in Nigeria, but across our continent. And I think Nigeria is even relatively better than large parts of the continent. Because we've been so hobbled and so held back. We don't have... Okay, there are two implications of this that make it very hard for entrepreneurs when I talk to my friends. And we don't talk about these things publicly, but we talk about them to ourselves. There are two parts of this that are a challenge. One is the unemployment it creates. And then the second is the lack of experience that it creates. So let me explain. So the lack of experience means that, how many businesses in Nigeria today can we point to that earn over $1 billion in revenue? There are just not that many. They're just like a handful. There may be 3, 4. How many businesses earn over $100 million? It's a handful. So what that means is that you've got this incredible population that is intrinsically very gifted, very dynamic, very energetic, but we haven't built up the experience in scaling businesses. That institutional knowledge, that collective societal knowledge that Americans, as a prime example, have abundantly, we don't have. You could throw a stone in California and you'd find somebody that has joined a business that has scaled from $1 million to $10 million.
Right.
You just can't find those people here. And I feel like I was ignorant of that for a very long time. Not well. I was academically, I knew it, but I didn't understand the implications of it. And so what that means is that when you're trying to build a team of people, you basically have to teach each other. So that whole Silicon Valley notion of hire fast, fire fast doesn't really apply here.
Right.
And that's something I learned from, a very fine gentleman who recently joined us. He's sitting here, Dipo, who joined as our head of people recently. And he said, he said something to me even just a few days ago. It's a conversation that's been rolling for a few months, but he said, nobody is ready-made.
Yeah.
Of course, there are some individuals that will be sufficiently deficient in technical skill and maybe deficient in your values. That you can't do anything about. But what I'm finding is the same way that I learned from Dipo is the same way we now have to teach each other in uLesson.
Right.
So I'm finding that my role as a CEO, and I didn't really think about this before, but it's something I'm trying to do with
Yes.
you and others, is this role of like coaching each other, and being more patient and coaching and developing each other, because those skills are just not really there. I mean, you've had experience even in businesses that have scaled, so relatively speaking, you're better than most. And so so in addition to the Nigerian entrepreneur having to deal with deficiencies in electricity, infrastructural deficiencies, you now take on this additional role of a coach, where and Elon Musk, both of us are reading his biography right now. It's a great book by Walter Isaacson. You can see that nowhere in that book was he ascribed that role of a coach?
No.
He just doesn't, he wouldn't even have time. In fact, often he'll talk about, do this or accept your resignation. Do this or accept your resignation. And so that leads me to the second point, is that we really need to kind of, make the tough decisions to get this country going, because unemployment here, so if you look in the United States, youth and unemployment broadly is about 3%.
Okay.
So even in the midst of, their economy having is 3%, and people are complaining about the economy. Youth and unemployment here is as high as 50. I've seen some estimates of 60% unemployment. So what does that mean? It creates a really tough context, because you're not balancing the needs of your business as you're an entrepreneur here. You're trying to scale the business. You're trying to find leaders to fill out those specialized functional areas. But then maybe some person is not working. And then you're trying to coach and it's not working. And so it's very, very tough. That's what I meant by I'm resilient. But in this area, I find that I struggle, because on the one hand, you want to see the business perform, but you know that if you let that person go, because unemployment is so high, you're subjecting them to trauma.
Right.
And this is a great tension. And it's only something that I learned in the later years of my entrepreneurship. So these challenges we're creating for ourselves as a society of Nigerians, there are many levels. It's not just physical infrastructure. In California, let's take the geography of California and let's take the functional area of a developer or an engineer. If you are laid off by, say, Meta in California, within a week, yes. But here, there is a context where there's somebody low income, maybe he's minimum wage, he works again at that pharmacy, or she works at that pharmacy, you let her go because of some technical deficiency or cultural misfit. You could argue that there are contexts where it's a death sentence. So if there's one thing actually that has made me sometimes think, man, I don't think I want to do this again, it's this challenge. It's this tension between you want the business to perform, but at the same time, you don't want to traumatize people. It's a very, very difficult thing to balance. And it cuts both ways, for the person that you have to find and then for yourself. So your challenge is you have a limited pool of talent to find. There are people that are eager, that are passionate, that want to do the work, and that maybe you can, we can upskill each other and, coach each other and be more patient with each other. But the pool is limited we have to admit that.
Yes.
And then at the same time, you've got this unemployment outside. So we've got a lot of work to do, I think, as a society.
I think your response to it really showcases one of our company values, which is empathy.
Yeah.
It's definitely layers and levels that I don't think many of us had thought about. So thank you for sharing that. We're going to go into questions now from the audience, and then we'll also take questions from those who are joining us online. So, do we have any questions here? No? Yes, AY.
Seriously.
Okay, after him. Yeah.
Hi, AY.
Thanks for the discussion and everything I'm saying. I've personally learned a lot from just listening. I know you've built a number of businesses in Nigeria. And again, as we've established, it's not easy building a new environment. Aside from what we've just finished discussing, are there specific things that you've identified that are important to consider when you're starting a business in Nigeria in this kind of environment?
So AY has become a really good friend. So I'm going to answer this the best way I can as if we were sitting down. It's that there's a lot of opportunity here. There are a lot of things that have not been done here that have been already done in other markets, which, by the way, is a perfectly acceptable form of innovation, taking business models that have been from another and then applying them to your own geography. and then localizing them to the degree you can. It's actually one of the definitions of innovation. But I think one of the things I've learned is that, well, first of all, I think we're all finding this out now. The demographics, the population does not indicate the actual addressable market. There's a big difference between the two. Huge difference between the two. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that, so all of this brand newness, this virgin market that we all have, and there's all of, it comes at a price. There's always something on the other side of the coin, right? So, and those are the things I've talked about, is how do you build teams? How do you maintain high standards and high quality? And again, some of these things, the low quality you see, the lack of empathy for customers, even some of the moral decay. This is not us intrinsically. I feel like the Nigeria I saw growing up in the 80s is very different from now. It's some of this is the consequence. So I find that you have to do not take what you see in other markets and jurisdictions as applicable here. There's more opportunity, but there's also, in some ways, more work. You hear your VCs who, like, we have some really intelligent VCs who really care about us and care about the business, and they've given a lot of advice, very well-intentioned advice. But I've often found that a lot of that advice just doesn't apply, and you have to kind of just listen to it, and smile and nod, and then still apply some judgment as to what you're going to use and what you're not going to use. So a lot of it just doesn't apply. The other thing I think is that, and this is really strange, that customer service, I kind of touched on this earlier, the ability to empathize with a customer, so quality from a customer service point of view, is a bona fide advantage here, where it's not in many other markets. And maybe it's because we're all just drunk on crude oil, but it creates this behavior where you don't care about the customer as much. And I feel like that's pervaded our society almost completely. And if you're that entity, you could literally be doing the same thing someone else is doing, but you're just more responsive. And I don't see how people don't see this. Like, there's this thing we have at Miva, right? One of the things we measure is how long it takes for us to pick up the phone. Right. When a customer phones. It's one of our North Star metrics here. At uLesson, I think their measure is the phone shouldn't ring more than 3 times. And a customer's problem shouldn't be resolved longer than 24 hours. You should resolve the problem. And at Miva, I think our response time is 1 minute. Right. Yes. So these are, and I think we've gotten it down to
in that range.
Yes.
1 to 2 minutes.
1 to 2 minutes. Yeah. Well, going the wrong direction.
No, it's in the 1 to 2 minute range.
So, but you get the point, right? So, I mean, this can be really powerful differentiators in our market, just because of the direction the society has gone over the past, I feel, 30, 40 years. Yeah. Right.
I want to go back to what you said about marketing. A pipeline is for a new product. Like, you have an MVP and then you don't have to put so much money on marketing, try and sell it to go to close doors. Okay, you can't sell this product or not. But and then you mentioned something about the best money to customers.
Yes.
Okay, now you are selling a product that the margin isn't that much, and now you are relying on either bootstrapping or making profits from the product. Most times, if we want to go to the market and you are selling to just few people, the money you get from the customers might not be able to scale the business. And there's this thing about tech business that will tell you to grow fast. Yes. So let me take this in here. About 4 years ago, we launched a product, and then what I wanted was that let's just keep making money. Let's keep making small money. Let's just keep putting it into the business. And we're doing that for 7 months. We were doing good. And then this new product came, got into YC, got funds, and they just put us out they were everywhere. So now we're building a new product, and we are still on bootstrapping and customer revenue. So how do you get to the point that you're able to scale with this small money you have and not allowing somebody else? Because the products are good, but to show it to people before somebody else come, and then they get big money, and then you are how to this.
Yeah.
So now my main question is that how do you from that part? You have built an MVP, and then you want to enter the market again. You are just bootstrapping and you are expecting profit. How do you market that kind of product to make it to the extent that you will be able to scale without getting external funding?
Yes. So without getting external funding. I think that's tough. So the scenario you've painted is the classic, I think, scenario for where you want to get money. The assumption I think you are making here is that, so there are businesses that if you may not be making a lot of profit margin, whether on the gross margin level or net margin level, but when they scale, then the margin appears.
Yeah.
I assume that's what you're talking about. So that company that went to YC and got funding and then scaled probably started enjoying better margins than you. So in some ways, you've answered the question, which is that they went to raise money. You have to be very honest with yourself and understand the business enough to say, okay, I'm doing this. It's working. I'm seeing margins, but the capital accumulation, the pace I can accumulate money to be able to get this thing to a point where it starts to take off is too slow. And somebody can come and take this opportunity. But if I get money, I can improve the margins. That right there is an indication that you should go and find somebody to invest in your business. You should go and try and get money somehow, somewhere. But you have to be honest with yourself. It's not that you're going to raise money and the margin profile of the business doesn't change. If it's going to be the same margin profile, then you might as well just keep going and let that person go to YC and come back and meet you where you are. But if it's that they're going to get some kind of structural advantage, capital can give advantage. And that can improve your margin profile, where maybe before your gross margin was 6%, but you raise capital and that gross margin improves to 15%, then I would say you can raise money as soon as you can. But you need to understand that very clearly in your mind. Yeah.
All right.
So I have 3 questions. First question is, you talked about how businesses have an expiry date. So I also wanted to ask, the ideas you have for these businesses, do they have an expiry date? Do they have a time frame in which they must be actualized, or they're just that? That's the first one. Second one is, just before you scale, to the young person, maybe still trying to bootstrap and find their feet and everything, just before you scale, how do you deal with the frustration, especially financial frustration? Have you ever had points where you were frustrated, financially, and how was it for you? How did you deal with that? And my third question, what is the line between collaboration and competition? Where do you draw the line? There are other people doing things similar to what you're doing. How do you draw the line between collaborating with them and competing with them? Where do you draw the line? Is there a line? Yeah, those are my questions.
So expiration date of an idea, frustration, and then collaboration, competition. Remind me if I forgot.
Correct. I'll remind you, don't worry.
So the idea itself, not the business. You're talking about the idea itself. Oh no, I just proceed on the basis that I think you should proceed rather on the basis that somebody else has thought about this thing, and just move fast. Like speed is something that I think is also a very powerful advantage. It's something we do here. In fact, one of the biggest things I try and do here is to just sustain a sense of urgency and speed, because as you get older, like institutional, there is a pushback that the institution, and it's not that anybody's doing this individually. It's just that decision making maybe has to pass through a few more links in the network. There's a bit more. You need to discuss things a bit more, and that also produces good outcomes. but you need to sustain speed. You need to just go fast and just assume somebody else. So of course, the time limit for some ideas is when somebody else has done it. Once somebody else has done it, then you need to just back out of it. In terms of frustration around an absence of cash,
Sorry, Sim, you think if someone else has done the idea,
it depends on the idea.
Okay.
Yeah, depends on the idea. If I feel like, and it also depends on the team.
Okay.
Yes. So put it like this: if the right team had executed on this tertiary institution that we're building, and I was aware enough of this team, and I did my intelligence, I send people out and say, find out about who are these people. There is a universe where I'll say, no, okay, this is gone.
Okay.
I'm not going to do this.
Okay.
But obviously, there's an ODL operating out there right now. But there was when we came into the market. Open distance learning is an ODL. But we still went for it. So it depends on the context.
You're saying something about the
No,
ODL?
I'm not saying anything. You're saying something. I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying they've done great work. And I have a lot of respect for the National Open University. They occupy a space in our society that is critical. They do things that I respect. There are prisoners in the Nigerian prison system that attend now.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
These are very valuable things that they do. So, I give them all the respect possible. But I still felt like there was a space for a private ODL. If there was another private ODL, is what I'm saying. No, trying to get me in trouble. So, the second question, frustration. I mean, I think the most, not really in terms of raising money. I bet a lot of my own money on things. A lot. And I've lost a lot. Sometimes I wonder whether my returns would be better just in the stock market or something. But, so it's not about sort of putting money in. I think the frustration is when you put something out there, and it's your business, it's your idea, it's your sweat. You've sold this idea to people. Maybe your friends have even put money in, which has happened a couple of times. And then you launch it to the public and then nobody comes. That happened with a business called iNollywood. This goes back to timing, which was a terrible name.
What's this business?
iNollywood.com. It was, this was in 2004. I had this idea. So I was going to digitize all these Nollywood movies, put them online, and then people could pay and watch Nigerian movies.
So it was like a Iroko TV before
Iroko. Before Iroko. And so a friend of mine, mentor of mine, gave me $100,000. And I think I put in maybe $10,000, and he took a minority position. A guy called Hakeem Bello Sagi.
Yeah.
He put in $100K, and not only that, he believed so strongly in this thing, but our timing was so off. Kim took me to, so I had this idea that how I was going to acquire customers was I'll go to NTA and digitize all the old village headmaster and Ichioku and Samanja and put all of these things online, and then people would come to just watch or get nostalgia,
right,
and then convert to paying customers, which was also very silly. And then Kim actually sort of took me to NTA, introduced me to this guy called Peter Igo, sat there with me, walked me through NTA, went physically with me to the meetings, got me rights to NTA's library. I signed the digital rights to NTA. I think they were in perpetuity. I think I still own those rights, to be honest. And then we went into the library, digitized the stuff, put it online. But at the end, we put it on, and the timing was wrong. Most Nigerians were still on 2G. Who had cards back then? I just didn't think about the context. Some of the things we talked about earlier. And so, I remember having to go and tell Kim that, I think it's time we shut this thing down. And it was, that was a dreadful, feeling. I think it maybe took me like a week before I finally had the courage to go and tell him that this thing is not going to work. And surprisingly, he just kind of was like, okay, no problem. Let's move on. So there's that. And then your third question, the line between competition and collaboration.
Yes.
I know. I mean, I feel like a lot of that is driven by culture, by people. Are you able to find like a zone of agreement? I think it's also driven by some wisdom and maturity. Like, I do believe more in collaboration now. I think when I was younger, in my early 30s, I was just like war, you know. There was a world where Konga and Jumia were supposed to be one company.
Yeah.
And our investors tried to make us merge very early in the first year of that business. But I think I was just way too hot-headed back then. And to be fair, I went to go meet the founder, or the ultimate owners of this business. And we talked about it, and I found their approach a bit condescending. And I got up at the end and I said, you know, and they were trying to convince me to do this, and I was kind of resistant to it. And I got up, and I think he resented the fact that I was resistant to it. And so he didn't shake. I put my hand out, and he didn't shake my hand.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, what an arrogant, you know. And if he had shaken my hand,
Konga and
it would
Jumia.
have, yeah, very likely, yeah. So. No, but I do think that there's space for it. Right now, we collaborate with other tertiary institutions a lot at Miva, and it's something I'm very proud of.
Actually.
And education, you know, it's one of those industries you can't do everything. There are so many facets, even to the running of a primary school. There's the learning management systems, there's curriculum stuff, it's all kinds of functions that we will likely expand and grow through acquisition and through collaboration. I don't think we'll be able to build everything. As time goes on.
Okay.
Okay. You mentioned values earlier on being paramount. So my question is, how do you balance those values, ethics, humanity, politics with technology?
How do you balance values against technology? I don't see it as a balancing act. I think they're exclusive of one another. In fact, values is your values are what help you survive through whatever seasons come and go, whatever leadership comes and go. I'm likely not going to be, at least in a direct sense, leading this organization for a long, long time. I mean, there are other things I want to do. But if those values are sufficiently in place, those will guide the next generation of leaders who should ideally create even more wealth than I created, and in the process themselves get wealthy. But no, I don't see any kind of conflict between the two. It's why Nokia again went from rubber boots to phones. It's why Naspers. Have you heard of Naspers? Who's heard of? So so Naspers owns DSTV, and Naspers. Well, I think they've spun it off now. And Naspers, who knows Tencent, the Chinese company? So they're a large shareholder in Tencent. But Naspers started at the turn of the 20th century with a newspaper in Cape Town. And yeah, exactly, a newspaper, I think it was called Der Burger or something. And the newspaper generated a lot of cash flow and was old and lasted. And the first team of managers of that newspaper had gone. And then, a whole new manager came back from Columbia Business School, which is where you went, and he joined Naspers, and he aligned with the values that were still sufficiently innovative. And he told the company, I want to take you into this direction of pay television, because he had seen it in New York. And so South Africa actually became one of the first markets with pay TV in the world because of Naspers. Wow. And so that's how MultiChoice was born. And then those same principles then guided them to China, where they invested in this little business called Tencent, which is perhaps some would say the best investment in the history of humanity, right? Although they did make some mistakes also. Naspers owned a small stake in a company, not a small, significant stake in a company we now know called MTN.
Really?
Yes, and then I think when MTN wanted to come to Nigeria, they said, no, if you're going to Nigeria, we're not going.
And they sold their stake.
They sold their stake. So, and maybe they got misaligned with their values a bit, I don't know. I don't know what their values are explicitly. But still an amazing entity that has gone from newspapers to, super sports 100 years later, and clearly the people that started it have gone. And now own, perhaps, a business. WhatsApp is inspired by Tencent. So I don't see any conflict. Instead, I see the values as the way you sustain over time.
One more thing. What would you tell your 25-year-old self to maybe focus more on or let go
of? Business-wise? Yeah, okay. Business-wise, not personally, obviously. What should I focus on? I guess, maybe I would have advised myself to stay in large tech for longer than start trying to start businesses right away. Because at that age, I was already trying. And I was just Nigeria was just way early. So maybe I should have stayed at Google, or I should have stayed, joined, Facebook back then, or something. That would have been the advice. And then come a bit. I feel like now is the time. So in other words, some of us from like the first class of tech entrepreneurs, Jason and Joku, myself, a few of these people, even we didn't see the full fruition of this. Yes, it's this cohort of people, people like the Paystack founders and the Flutterwave founders and the fintech guys, and even outside of fintech. Like Nigeria is now starting to blossom. There was still some exuberance and overfunding and some problems, but we have a real ecosystem now. And back in 2005, 2006, I was just running around. There's a lot of energy, and maybe I should have saved some of that energy and stayed in corporate for longer.
That's interesting. We have a question. I'd like to get to this question from the online audience. And it's, how do you market and convince customers about a product not yet produced? So it's that crowdfunding, Kickstarter,
right,
you talked about earlier.
No, even crowdfunding and Kickstarter, generally you have a prototype. You should have a prototype of some kind. That's not to say that there aren't people that are skilled at selling something that is flawed. I don't know if I have that skill. I don't have that skill. Some people do. I can sell something that's not there. I'm not sure I have that talent. And I'm not sure you should be doing that. Yeah.
Oh, so the answer is don't do that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can't think of a context in which it's moral to do that. Maybe there is.
I know that on Kickstarter, there's some people who will go crowdfund for an idea, and there are venture capitalists who give you money for an
just
idea.
An idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it happens.
So.
Yeah, so I mean, actually, I would do that, but generally, let's be honest, what you're doing at that point, is you're not funding the idea, you're funding the person. Right? That's really what you're doing. You're buying a stake in the person's time for the next. You're assuming, look, this person's going to go and do something. I don't know what they're going to do. It's probably going to be good. And then they bank on it. Yeah.
Okay.
So I guess, it can happen.
Okay.
Okay, I have two questions. The first is, how do I join investors to see the potential of my business? How do I attract investors to see the potential of my business and actually stay with me through it?
Yeah.
I don't want them coming in and pulling out the next minute due to some other business going on or shadow. And then, do I let every customer's feedback influence my business choices? Like, okay, let me take Miva now. The raise, everyone's complaining, raise. Do you let it influence every decision you make concerning your business?
So in the specific case of Miva, yeah, absolutely. I think there are several of us, so she's referring to the fact that tuition was supposed to be increased. Because reduced. Okay. So you're complaining that it's going down?
That is going up.
Oh, yeah. We're very sensitive to that. Very, very sensitive. And in fact, on that particular case, we're probably going to make some changes and some announcements on that on Monday or later today. So I think that, what you want is, obviously you don't want to, one opinion is very hard to bank on. But if you're getting the same opinion from a large number of people, especially if those people are unconnected, they're not talking to each other, right? So I walk into a different household and they tell me something, walk into this household, they're telling me something, the same thing. Then, vox populi, vox Dei, the voice of man is the voice of God. You need to start paying attention to that. Especially if you feel like you can still sustainably serve that business. We've tried, like what we optimize for at Miva and even at uLesson is to make education accessible to as many people as we can. That's what we're optimizing for. We believe that the money will follow. So we're not optimizing for money at all, which is why we started out with the fees we started out with. If we could make it lower, we would make it lower. And so we're trying to figure out how to do that right now. But it's also important that the enterprise be sustainable, that it sustain itself. And then maybe as it scales, there might be even more room for reduction, and maybe we can find ways to use technology to drive the unit cost, the cost of serving a customer down. So there's that. Now, to your first question of how do you convince an investor, I mean, it always starts with that, there's this, you want to, there's a very powerful tool. You want to do your unit analysis. Take one customer, and you want to be very disciplined, very honest with yourself of what you will make from that customer and what it costs to serve that customer. Now, if I as an investor see that you can profitably, first of all, acquire that customer and serve that customer and still generate cash flow, then it just means that the funds I'm investing will just allow you to do more. But if on a unit basis, we're not being honest with ourselves, and on a unit basis, you're losing money, and there's no clear path, because like the gentleman earlier was saying, it's possible you're losing today, but there is a path to when you can start making, and there's no clear path to when you can start making margin on that customer, then you should leave it alone. And I feel because capital has been so cheap for the past 10, 15 years, money has been so cheap. I know we're sitting here in Nigeria saying, what the hell is he talking about? But on a global level, if you look at kind of United States macroeconomics, interest rates have been so low that, venture capitalists have been flooded with so much money that decisions have been made to fund businesses that are not good on a unit basis. We've seen a lot of those kinds of things, which is why you see a business like it's worth $5 billion. Literally 12 months later, the business is bankrupt.
Yep.
Like that should not be the case. Somebody at some point was not honest with themselves, the entrepreneur or the investor. So I think it even starts with the entrepreneur. You must be honest with yourself, because you will meet cheap capital. It will happen again. And so you have to be able to back out of that. Now, in terms of investors leaving you, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Maybe there is this thing I've seen, which is a bit unhealthy in our funding environment, where an investor will say, I've invested $1 million in your business, but I'll only give you 100, or let me use Naira, 1 million Naira in your business, and I'll only give you 100,000 Naira now, but when you hit this milestone, I'll give you another 100,000. But then the press release is done, and it says, lady XYZ raised $1 million Naira, but the truth is it's not in the bank. Maybe that's what you're referring to. So at any point, they could just walk away. I wouldn't bank on, if an investor is committing to your business, I would draw down the cash. I don't buy into this whole staggered drawdown, partial drawdown kind of thing. Commit. If all you're giving is 100,000, that's great. That's awesome. I know that's what's in the bank, and I will work with the 100,000, but not bank on what's happening in the future.
Thank you, Sim. We'll take one more question from the audience and a question from our VC, and then we'll wrap up. Okay.
So,
Just one minute.
so if you could change something about the Nigerian education system currently,
Yes.
if the president of Nigeria just came and gave a power to change one thing about the Nigerian education system, what would it be?
That's a fantastic question.
Thank you.
And I have an answer because I've been thinking about it for the past few months. I would address K-12, primary secondary school, and I would change the statutory requirements, even though it's not a president thing. This K-12 is regulated by the states, not the federal government. But I would remove the requirements and restrictions around what it takes to start a primary or secondary school. I would make it so that a community, whether they are a church group or a mosque group or a traditional group, an ethnic group, a neighborhood group of mothers or fathers can start a school, and using technology, curriculum, and resources can be delivered into the corner of some street. We have 923,000 classrooms in Nigeria. Those are the classrooms that Class Board, our new product, is ultimately going to target. It's a huge opportunity. You would think that that's big. But that 923,000 only represent 40% of the children in Nigeria. 60% of our kids are out of school. So if we're going to address those 60%, what sort of capital would it require from a private actor, speak less of a public actor, with all of the inefficiencies that are inherent in even the most efficient governments, right? What kind of capital do you need to harness to address that 60%? It's an untold amount of money. So we have to rethink how we're going to educate these children, especially because it's a very easy calculation. Because first of all, we are showing at uLesson that efficacy of technology-mediated instruction is at least on par and in many instances superior to the traditional way. And the alternative is you have nothing. My vision for the future is we have this class board right now. Class board, when we bring it to market, is going to be pre-recorded lessons and assessments and resources for a teacher. And we're going to deliver that to a classroom for a cost that is at least 50% of a competing solution out there in the market right now. It's exciting. The next step for class board is we want to be able to stream using 5G, and stream doesn't even adequately capture it. We want to be able to push in a physics teacher to a school that does not have a physics teacher. And so a kid who is in that class can raise their hand, and that physics teacher, wherever they are teaching from, can see that Yemi raised his hand in Badagry Secondary School. What's your question, Yemi? And he can answer that question and talk with that kid. That is the next chapter in our minds of where we want to go. And we want to be able to put this class board. So if I'm talking to a state governor or the president of the federation today, we need the regulatory and the statutory context to allow any group of women in any village come together and say we want to create a school for our kids between the age of 12 and 15. We're going to get class board, the curriculum, the timetable, very much like how you go on DSTV and you see your timetable of football is being played now, this is going to be played. This is the timetable for junior secondary school. And we are provisioning this, and it's interactive, and the child's questions can be answered, and we can take attendance, and we can know whether Yemi is in class, and we can know all of those things and stream it to a regulatory authority. But we have to do away with some of these requirements that don't have anything to do with anything. How many square meters of land is the school on? Does the school have a clinic or not? I mean, even the core primary care system of our country, let's be honest, how many primary care clinics are there? So how can it be a statutory requirement that the school must have a clinic? So we have this multitude of problems. Let's face them. And let's stop pretending like we are the same macroeconomic points that Canada or Norway or Denmark or Japan is. We're just not at the same place. It doesn't mean we can't get there very quickly, but for us to get there, we have to rethink it. The first schools in the United States were built in such a way that the child's commute to school, in many instances, was not more than 200 meters. They just walked to school. Now you have imposed this cost of, because we are trying to jump ahead and not thinking about things properly, the child lives in Yaba, in Sabo, in Yaba, and their school is in Alimosho. So just think about the cumulative cost of transportation. If you gather all that cost of transport of all the families, private and public, and put it together, it's huge societal cost and inefficiency. So that's how I would think about it. Bring the schools smaller, make the schools smaller, bring them closer to the communities, fragment them, and then use technology to go into the schools. That is what I would advocate. And whatever the regulations are that would impede that vision, smaller, more, closer, whatever those regulations are, get rid of them. That's how I would think about it.
Wow, thank you. So we have a question.
All right, thank you, Sim. And it's been wonderful listening to you on this why. And I take it as a privilege because I've been somebody that is highly successful entrepreneur to speak with us. And I picked something when you were talking earlier, timing of idea. That is the timing. And I look at it that what influences that is actually government policies. Government policies can influence when an idea is suitable. Just like 5G, government did not approve policy for 5G. To have been difficult to come in at an earlier, to bring an innovation earlier. And also even the open distance learning, if not policy of government, we'll not be talking about it now. And what I want to ask is that you as a visionary leader and some people who are already established entrepreneurs, innovators, what are you doing together to influence government in terms of policy so that we can be better, we can innovate more?
Yes.
That's my question.
Thanks, Professor Tayo. And I appreciate the question. And I also appreciate your efforts at sort of driving us to innovation. You've constantly been one of those forces. Many of us have, actually. We're just trying to push the edge a bit. One of the advantages of the uLesson group is that we are based in Abuja. And so we're very close to government. And when Ayolua and I made that decision to move from Jos to Abuja, for the first year or so, we're wondering, did we, I know I did. And was this a mistake? Should we have just gone to Lagos or something? Which is a commercial nerve center. But like you said, government policy drives a lot. But in the past year, I have to say, I've actually been impressed by how much relevant agencies have started to engage with us. We want more engagement, of course. And we want our input. Of course, not everything we'll say will be taken lock, stock, and barrel. Like this vision I painted just now, I can't imagine it will happen like that. But government is listening more and more. In the past year, we've been privileged to host UBEC, yes, the Universal Basic Education Commission, the Ministry of Education, the permanent secretary of that ministry, outgoing permanent secretary has visited us, the National University Commission, of course, in the process of licensing Miva has been here. Agencies that have to do with development of certain regions of this country have been here. We've engaged with members of the Secretariat of the Federal Capital Territory. They are looking to do some incredible things with technology. And so if you look at it actually, and then when I talk to my friends who are private operators in the education space in other countries, again, like, Norway, Finland, what I'm finding actually is that our regulatory bodies, there's this big perception in our minds because of the cynicism Nigerians have built up against government, and justifiably so. There's cynicism, but I think if you peel back that cynicism, you'll see that we actually have agencies that are trying to figure this thing out, and they are being responsive. The fact that the NUC licensed Miva, I think, speaks to that. You're not seeing that happen in many jurisdictions. So, we will continue to engage. We know government moves at a different pace from private enterprise. They have many more stakeholders to think about, a much larger population. They have a population to balance out. They have to weigh all kinds of things. It's a bureaucracy ultimately, and we know what that word means. The bureaucracy operates government. So it just moves a bit slower, but we have to keep engaging. But I think the intentions are there, and it's up to us to keep educating them on what's possible, kind of pushing them forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Sim.
Thank you, Anyekeme. That was easier than I thought.
I don't know why you thought it would be difficult. Come on. So we've taken quite a bit of time. We still have people who have questions, but we know that you're going to be around for a little bit, so they can pose those questions to you. Before we end, it's a Saturday, just to end this on a bit of a lighter note. If you could partner with any fictional character or celebrity, right, to launch a business, who would it be, and what kind of venture do you think you would create together?
Jeez, who would I partner with, and what kind of business would we create together? Apart from this one, you mean?
Apart from this one.
This would have to be an individual. I don't know who, but somebody with like deep patience, loads of capital. Like loads of capital.
It can be a fictional character too.
Okay, yeah. So somebody who's like, very patient, deep vision, loads of capital.
Iron Man,
Tony Stark.
yeah.
No, but nothing too like. So something in the energy space.
Okay.
Probably. Yeah, either in mobility or energy generation or mobility, electric bikes or tricycles or things like that.
Okay.
But those things take a long time. They lose money for 10 years. That's why I said loads of capital. But yeah, I don't know if I have the appetite for another one of these things. Maybe you can, but not another.
Wow.
Actually, not you. We need you here. You're not.
All right. Thank you so much again, Sim. This has been wonderful. Would love for our VC to just give a quick vote of thanks, and we'll close this. Sim will be around, and we have some snacks for the people who are here in person. Folks joining us online, thank you so much for being a part of this. VC.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon. That's wonderful to hear that. And today, Sam has spoken with us, and you can see that he's wearing many caps. Entrepreneur, visionary leader, and even as a chancellor. So on behalf of the university management, staff, students, I want to say thank you for joining. And for people joining online, thank you so much. We appreciate you. And the next time when we call for the next masterclass, we want you to join. I believe you enjoyed this. If you enjoyed, please give a round of applause. I want us to end with a round of applause for our master class presenter.